Oh, welcome back to the channel, everyone. Chipmunk of Power here. Here we have the next installment on my ever-continuing series, my mission to watch every movie in the Turner Classic Movies collection, currently hosted by HBO or Max or whatever they're calling themselves now. Also, in case you missed it, I am watching these movies, well, not the movies themselves, but I am watching the list in backwards order for reasons I have already explained, so don't expect A, B, and C just yet. In keeping with this idea, these next 15 movies I have to add to the list, I will be listing backwards. Without further ado, let's get started, or maybe I should say, let's get ended. No, that doesn't sound right either, but you know what I mean. Let's go. The Yearling, 1946. Directed by Clarence Brown, starring Gregory Peck and Jane Wyman. 128 minutes. Okay, for this one, let's just start right in with the spoilers, shall we? I'd never watched this movie or read the book because it's an animal story, and I know to avoid those like the plague because, well, let's face it, we all know why, don't we? And this one is especially egregious. I was not looking forward to this, but I will say it's a good movie. Even with, Gregory Peck is the Southern farmer some years after the Civil War, fighting the different fight that is farming, attempting to make something out of what appears to be a rather difficult land to farm, but then I'm hardly an expert. He lives far from town with his only son and cranky wife, Jane Wyman, but it soon transpires that she has a very good reason why she's cranky and that there's more to her than it first appears. The boy is naturally lonely and wants a pet, and eventually he gets one when his dad is forced to kill a doe, death off screen, leaving behind a fawn. Long story short, it's a coming-of-age story, with the boy eventually being forced to do the absolute worst thing to his pet, putting it out of its misery. So yeah, it's even worse than it could have been. In fact, this kid ends up seeing a lot of death and people just plain leaving him within a short space of time. So, overall, it's a good film, with Peck's character having infinite patience with his wife and son. One would hope, honestly, as they've been saddled with his determination to farm in such a rough place, and they didn't ask for any of this. But basically, he's being the best husband and dad ever under his self-imposed circumstances. But if you watch it, there's not only animal unaliving, but some animal violence as there are hunting scenes. So, all that is most definitely something to take into consideration. Wuthering Heights, 1939. Directed by William Wyler, starring Laurence Olivier and Merle Oberon. 103 minutes. There's been a lot of talk with that most interesting sounding new version in the theaters at this current time, so it makes sense TCM would put it back in their offerings right now. I've seen this but not in a while, and I just wasn't in the mood to watch it, so I don't know if you'll want to take my word for anything here, but forthcoming in the spirit of honesty and all that. Olivier is the lad taken in by the family out on the English moors, but still he is treated like a servant and never allowed to forget their kindness to a beggar, so you kind of get where he's coming from when he's a jerk, but still, he's a jerk. Oberon was a great actress, but I personally feel she wasn't quite Kathy. Like some other versions, this one plays up the quote-unquote love story between the two, even though they ruin the lives of everyone else around them in the process, so it's a lot of work to justify calling it a love story, even with the great Flora Robeson doing the hard labor on that front. This was an early role for Geraldine Fitzgerald, for which she got a deserved Oscar nomination. I would actually like to have seen her as Kathy instead, which maybe would have worked if they had been truer to the novel as well. It's a beautiful, well-made film, and Olivier brings in his brooding, well-spoken best that he did so wonderfully at this time. But it's not enough, because as so many have said, and I have to agree, that's not what the story is, and it won't be, no matter how hard anyone tries to say otherwise. This Modern Age, 1931. Directed by Nicholas Grind, starring Joan Crawford and Pauline Frederick. 68 minutes. Frederick is a middle-aged single lady living the party life in Paris off the courtesy of her benefactor, if you know what I mean. Okay, to be clear, there's a rich dude who's nuts about her and is paying for everything. Crawford is the daughter of Frederick's early divorce, who she hasn't seen since Crawford was a baby. Once Crawford is of age, she emancipates herself from her father's Puritan upbringing and comes to find her mom. They hit it off splendidly, and Crawford moves in, although Frederick is cagey about the realities of her situation. Crawford then falls in love with an American, but once his rich family finds out about the party lifestyle, and Crawford learns the truth about Frederick, it seems certain the two will never marry because, oh, the scandal! And it's dated that way, though then again not, because people are still people. I don't always like Crawford, but I liked her here. The real love story here is between Crawford and Frederick, who are quite believable as mother and daughter, and also they're damn good pals. Frederick's character is indeed modern in being a mother who loved her daughter and didn't want to leave her, but who also couldn't and wouldn't subjugate her own wants and even needs to the wills of someone else. There are more layers there than I was expecting. This was not a bad little movie, and not a bad way to spend an hour or so. Sweet Bird of Youth, 1962. Directed by Richard Brooks. Starring Geraldine Page and Paul Newman. 120 minutes long. It's from Tennessee Williams, so you should have some idea where all this is going to be heading. Southern folk with class strata and privilege and lots of feelings that everyone has about that. Newman is the lad who falls for unsavory politician Ed Begley's daughter, Shirley Knight. Begley uses his wiles to get Newman out of town chasing waterfalls in an attempt to be worthy of Knight. Turns out Newman should have stuck to the rivers and lakes that he was used to, because all his waterfalls end by getting dammed up or running dry, just like this metaphor. As a last-ditch effort, he has effectively kidnapped fading movie star Paige in an attempt to blackmail her into giving him a contract as her next leading man. Now I put Paige before Newman because, as good as he is, and no matter how many times he takes his damn shirt off, and he's very good here, this is her movie. She's excellent, necessarily frustrating at times, and also heartbreaking when she comes clean about her own situation. Honestly, what's really frustrating about her story is how judgy people can be about each other, like here, the public, about the movie stars they profess so to love. Not to mention, this is a timely discussion in many circles, as one of her concerns is her aging. I think she's only in her late 30s here, but even today, that's a hard age for an actress. All that aside, overall, this is a very good movie. And Begley, with a bit of his 12 Angry Men style characterization, okay, I think that's the only movie I've seen him in, also gives excellent slimeball. Shoutouts also to Mildred Dunnock as a woman giving as much of her own silent form of rebellion as possible, and to a young Rip Torn, which to someone of my generation is just kind of weird to see. Williams is not quite my cup of tea, but I can't deny this is a well-made film and well-told story, just great work by everyone. Strike Up the Band, 1940. Directed by Busby Berkeley. Starring Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney. 120 minutes. Hey kids, let's put on a show! This is very much in the mold, following the success of Babes in Arms and disturbing very little of the formula for fear of ruining the mix. Rooney and Garland and various other juveniles of the time are high schoolers. Rooney, music running through his veins, starts a dance band to play school dances, and then sets his sights on winning a big band contest on the radio. This one is for musical and or Berkeley fans. I'm both, and even I felt that the musical numbers went on for far too long. The ending seems to have inspired Peter Jackson when he pieced together Return of the King. If you've seen these types of films before, there are many familiar faces here. Proto-Femme Fatale June Pracer? Nuts. The Shop Around the Corner's William Tracy, and Perpetual Youth Larry Nunn all make appearances. Plus, we have Anne Shoemaker as Rooney's mother, a woman supremely adept at the mama guilt trip, and Paul Whiteman as himself. He does a fine job, and there is also an adorable part where the shot begins with him so obviously looking off camera for his cue. The real draw here, besides the musical numbers if you've the patience, are Garland's eternal vulnerability that makes you mourn her too early loss all the more, Rooney's manic energy stemming from determination to please the audience at any cost that can get wearing, but then he really did want to make people happy, so it came from a good place, and dang was he multi-talented to boot. And sometimes you do just want, or need, to watch a film where slings and arrows hit, but everyone puts in their best effort and it all works out. Though I can't help thinking that when the kids here put on a show, sure, they've purportedly already got costumes, but everything else must have cost at least as much as they're raking in, so what exactly was the point? But then again, that's not the point of the film. Yeah, I know, don't take it seriously. Even the serious stakes thrown at the end you know will work out for the best, and they do. It's just fun. The Story of Louis Pasteur, 1936. Directed by William Diderot. I think that's right, I still don't know. My gosh, what kind of film fan am I? Starring Paul Muni and Josephine Hutchinson. 87 minutes. I'd heard about Muni's biopic success, but heretofore the only thing I had seen him in is his scenery-chewing turn in the original Scarface. Suffice to say, he was a most excellent actor if this one is anything to go by. Rumored to be difficult to work with, but as with many things, that probably depends on who's saying it. As you might expect, this film shows Pasteur as an obvious genius who was unappreciated in his time, but who doggedly stuck to his work for the good of all mankind, trademark, and was vindicated in the end. While not a plaster saint, he is pictured as having few flaws, which is par for the course of the time. I don't know the actual story of Pasteur's life, but take it for granted that he was more of a layered human. While also being a savior to many humans, two things can be true at once. Hutchinson is everything the requisite steadfast wife, who gets saddled with raising the children, managing the household, otherwise such thankless work so the great man can go around great manning, needs to be in such a situation. I'm not much familiar with her work, although she was a steady enough actress, and I believe I remember reading somewhere she sometimes worked as a drama coach on the Warner Brothers studio lot. According to Wikipedia, she was once involved in a lesbian affair. Gasp! Drama! Gossip! Anyway, this also got decent reviews at the time it came out, with Graham Greene stating that Muni played the character with his whole body. And I think that's an accurate description. The film may not be so accurate, but it was entertaining, and Muni's version of the man was absorbing. Special Agent, 1935. Directed by William Cayley. Starring Bette Davis and George Brent. 76 minutes. Note, this is really, really easy to confuse with the 1936 Hitchcock film Secret Agent, at least on an internet lookup tried 3 times in a row, at least if you're me. Brent is an undercover IRS agent / news reporter who romances Davis's bookkeeper. As her boss is a notorious gangster, he also uses her to try to bring the big boss down. This was more absorbing than I thought it was going to be. The acting isn't as dated and wooden as you would think of for such an of-the-time, more or less throwaway piece as at least I had expected, with Ricardo Cortez bringing a lovely subtle menace to the role of the boss, and a nice supporting bit by J. Carol Naish. It's an early enough role for Davis that doesn't hold anything to show off her special talents, but it is still enough to see that she was on her way. Better than expected, and not a bad early crime drama on the whole. Silver River, 1948. Directed by Raoul Walsh. Starring Errol Flynn and Ann Sheridan. 110 minutes. Amazingly, oddly for me, when this came onto my viewing radar, I thought, perfect! I'm actually in the mood for not just a black and white classic Hollywood, but a Western, which never happens. However, this didn't quite fit the bill, as it's more a straight drama than a Western. Flynn is a soldier who gets kicked out of the army and ends up building a gambling and saloon empire, and then builds upon that to create a banking system and ends up controlling a whole heck of a lot of things in various towns, all with the aim of having more and never being satisfied because there's a hole in his soul that can't be filled, I guess. Sheridan is the lady object of his desire, a co-silver mine owner with her husband that Flynn manages to inveigle a stake in, and then he engineers the death of said husband, although he later regrets this but is too late to stop what he has set in motion. Despite herself, Sheridan then falls for and marries him, a development I found profoundly irritating. Thomas Mitchell plays his usual part of the alcoholic lawyer/preacher man turned hopeful politician, who also stands in as the would-be conscience of Flynn. Now, it's a neat idea having Flynn play such a part, but it's not like his usual rakish heroes. This guy is really actually the villain. And since we're in 1948 and he's Errol Flynn, he can't actually be the villain, but he's got to have a change of heart and turn around at the end, and it's a little too late for my money and just doesn't work. Neat idea, not so neat execution. The Search, 1948. Directed by Fred Zinman. Starring Montgomery Clift and Aileen McMahon. 105 minutes. Whoo, wow, was I unprepared for this one. Just be advised, this is heavy subject matter, and tissues at the very least will be required. Just after World War II, McMahon is a member of the Red Cross, working to bring together, temporarily house and care for, and relocate unclaimed children who have been in concentration camps. So yeah, right there. Even typing this description out for my script is... It doesn't help any knowing that many of the children rescued in reality were probably in worse shape than they were portrayed in the film. And the kids here clearly have trauma, they come from different backgrounds, so interpreting can be an issue. And they don't understand the difference between their previous captors and those now trying to help them. Two children who are being transported freak out and escape. One doesn't make it, and the other wanders until he comes across Clift, a GI who catches the child much as one would catch a wild animal, and he not only works to make him feel secure, but tries to find his family. I don't mind saying there is ultimately a happy ending for the boy, but the movie takes its time getting there, and again, this is a harsh reminder that there were all too many children who didn't have anyone waiting for them or anyone to really care for them. Hefty, hefty, hefty stuff. Satan Met a Lady, 1936. Directed by William Diderot. Starring Warren William and Betty Davis. 74 minutes. This is an adaptation of The Maltese Falcon, before The Maltese Falcon we all know so well. And it isn't as well known because it doesn't work as well. Wellman is here the main detective with a take on it vastly different from Bogey's. A ladies' man who approaches death and danger with an almost, if you'll pardon the expression, suicidal, devil-may-care attitude. I mean, banter and humor is a great antidote to fear, but leave us not be ridiculous. The characters here are all the known characters, but they're not, as they've been changed. Apparently, Warner Brothers had the rights to the story, but they wanted to milk it for all it was worth. So here, they hired a screenwriter to change all the trappings while keeping the basic idea. Alison Skipworth is fine in the Sidney Greenstreet role, and also Arthur Treacher is a treacher? Well, I tried. In the apologetic British gent villain part. I like Marie Wilson. But her dumb blonde delivery also gets on the nerves, and her role as the loyal secretary, she's just playing in the movie too much. Bette Davis hated this film, but it was a better showcase of her talents than Special Agent, in my humble opinion. And I have become a Warren William convert, and it was nice to see him doing something a little different. That said, this was far from a great film. Samurai Trilogy Part 1, Misashi Miyamoto, 1954. Directed by Hiroshi Inagaki. Starring Toshiro Mifune and Rentaro Mikuni, 93 minutes. Here's one thing I love about going through this list in a random style way. Until now, this list has been all Hollywood or Hollywood adjacent, that is to say, American films. And this is the first foreign film on the list. All I'm saying is that I never know what I'm going to get for each video I make of these, and that's kind of neat. So here we have Mifune as a man from a small village who joins the army with a friend, hoping for a little quick fortune and glory. Instead, they both find out war kinda sucks and that they're really not cool with it. Their side loses and they nip out, hiding with a kooky widow and her daughter to avoid getting taken as prisoners. From there, he and his friends' paths diverge as Mifune embarks on what is basically a journey of self-discovery. This is best taken with the other two as one big movie. So I will move right on to Samurai Trilogy Part 2, Duel at Ichijoji Temple, 1955. Directed by Hiroshi Inagaki, starring Mifune and Koji Tsurata, 93 minutes. Here, as with many trilogies, we find the meat of Mifune's journey, as he does the bulk of realizing he will have to work to change if he wants to become the swordsman and just plain man he wants to be. Here his adventures take him to again cross paths with his old friend, said old friend's girl who has become Mifune's girl, the widow's daughter who also has a thing for him and has a damn sad path of her own, and fights various duels on his way to the big one. Tsurata here is introduced as the man who will become the main antagonist. It's another great installment in this mega story. Samurai Trilogy Part 3, Duel at Ganryu Island, 1956. Directed by Hiroshi Inagaki. Starring Mifune and Tsurata, 105 minutes. Threads come together and are resolved, with the old friend attempting to masquerade as Tsurata in quite a hilarious part. The devastating conclusion of the widow's daughter's story. Damn, Akemi got a raw deal and deserved much better. Justice for Akemi! And said final duel. Not long enough, but still great other than the lighting not matching up, which is kind of annoying. Overall, this is a great story with great acting, one of those epics that feels small as it focuses mainly on one person and their problems. The final duel might be shorter than expected, and the ending comes soon after, which seems abrupt. But perhaps that's the point? Like, all this build-up and it's over already, and what else is there is what would be confronted in real life. And it's a thing that makes you think long after the film is over, which is usually what you want in a movie. I also especially love the use of color, which is mainly due to the excellent costuming. But all the exterior locations are really nice, and some shots are just plain gorgeous. These are just really good films. Salesman, 1969. Directed by David and Albert Maysles, 91 minutes. This is a documentary about, of all things, Bible salesmen. According to the net, this was around the time that door-to-door salesmen began being phased out, which tracks. Not just door-to-door salesmen, but those of the Bible variety used to be ubiquitous in the US of A, and it's interesting that those of my generation and later really don't have that so much as part of our experience. Although the film introduces itself as following 4 salesmen, the title of the film is accurate, as most of the focus ends up being on a singular fellow, Bostonian Paul Brennan, who is in the middle of a slump in his sales. A professional, he tries not to let it show while trying to sell, but his growing frustration with not being able to make headway is palpable, and may indeed be a feedback loop factor in his slump as well. Even I, who hate being sold to with a passion, felt for this guy as he was working so hard and just couldn't get anywhere, even while his companions had better luck. This one was also far more absorbing than I expected, and was a look into a world with which I had no experience, so it was highly educational that way. And the fact that it was all real made it hit a bit harder. And now I can't stop wondering if the poor guy ever got out of his slump and what happened to him. Quick Google search, he did get out of the business, but he also had a roofing and siding company, so I guess he did okay. Recommend you check this one out. Sadie McKee, 1934. Directed by Clarence Brown. Starring Joan Crawford and Edward Arnold. 93 minutes. And we finish up the list with another Crawford film, part of the hefty Crawford contingent Hibbo Max swept in at once. Here Crawford is a gal getting by working as a rich folks' personal waitress. She overhears the son of her employer dissing on her boyfriend, and she walks out, denouncing them all as snobs. She heads to the big city with said boyfriend, Gene Raymond, where they get a room and plan to marry, but soon his head is turned by another woman and he nips out. Too proud to go home, Crawford finds work at a nightclub, and herself turns the head of alcoholic rich dude Arnold, in what is overall a wonderfully sweet turn. At his insistence, she marries him. Everyone thinks she's just a gold digger, but she ends up nursing him through his alcoholism when no one else will. She does end up divorcing him and finding love at the end of all her trials. Not being a fan of obviously manipulative tear-jerkers, this was hit or miss for me, but it did have its charms, Arnold chief among them. And that was it for another installment of every single film in that Turner Classic Movie Collection. And yes, I'm not through them because they add new movies every month, but then again, they take away movies every month, and some of those movies are the same movies, so I will get through this eventually. I am determined. I hope you stick with me. So, as usual, have you seen any of these movies, and what are your thoughts? What sounded intriguing? What did not? All the thoughts below in the comments, please. I would love to read them. Until next week, we have another week we have gotten through, and we have another week to get through. 1 week at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, etc. I know you can do this. I'm pulling for you. Hang in there, champ. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.